Hi there, welcome. Episode 4 of Stories of a First Gen Latina. Happy to have you all here. I'm your host, Monica Andrea, and we are going to talk about still identity. It's such a huge topic. I wanted to do a few of these episodes on identity specifically. Identity is enormous type of topic for us because we are pulled in all sorts of directions and sometimes don't feel that we fit perfectly anywhere as other individuals might, or that we perceive that they do. Today, specifically from identity, I want to talk about branding. So, how you identify, how you define yourself outward as well as inward. So, both inward and outward. That's the brand that we are going to talk about today, or at least the type of branding that we want to demonstrate out to the world as much as we're demonstrating from within. And authenticity of your personal brand. When we think brand, we think commercial branding like Nike and Adidas and whatever other brand, right? Apple and Samsung, if we're talking about phones. But talking about branding is also a persona, someone's brand, how they show up in the world, and then how they identify with themselves. How connected are they? How do they know themselves? Because that's really what's going to peek through when you're showing the outside of who you are. As first generation individuals, we have a clash with what that identity looks like and how we want to show up in the world. There's a lot of societal pressures on how we show up in the world. We often have this clash, which is why I talk about the inner connecting, getting to know yourself. In the few episodes back, we talked about taking action in documenting what your North Star might look like. What is your dream? What is your goal? What do you want to achieve? What do you love? If you don't know what you love, let's explore that. Let's that be the North Star. That I want to know and find out more about me and what I love and who I am. So interconnecting, redefining or identifying yourself is going to be that first step. We can do that through that reflection piece that I talked about. You can do it through meditation. You can do it through reading and exploring online different strategies that help support you in identifying who you are and your purpose. I do love this one exercise that I have done many a times with me. And I draw an idea. So it's like a sheet of paper. You have an idea in the middle of it. And it could be, what is my purpose? It could be, who do I want to be when I grow up? And it's like we've done back in like elementary school days, the web, where you start to pull different areas of what that defined as. So I love dancing. Okay, there's a dancing extension of that web as we're creating this web. I love communicating and talking to people. There's that part. What am I good at? Oh, I'm good at, still dancing. Dancing's something I'm good at. I'm good at helping people. And so I extend to that. I'm great at video games. I'm really not. I'm awful at video games, but that might resonate with you. Or I'm a really great reader. I love to submerge myself in a great book. And so then you'll find, that you'll add a web for reading. I'm a great daughter, right? I help my parents through, hard times and good times. I'm a great sibling, I'm reliable. And you start to create this web to identify who you are and the great things and qualities and attributes that you bring forward. That web will help you rebuild and reconnect with yourself. It will give you also an opportunity to celebrate who you are. Take that moment to do that, because based off of that web is how we're going to develop this brand of yours on how you want to show up in the world. Part of that, which is the second piece of phase, is who do you admire the most? Who is that individual in your life, or that even, it could be someone that you haven't met yet, It could be someone who you admire, like a star or something, right? An author, a movie director. It could be, a show host. It could be your neighbor. It could be a colleague, a leader, a parent, a sibling, a best friend. It could be your husband, wife, partner. Who do you admire? And so the second part of it, after we've identified who we are with that web, the second piece of it is about who you admire. And so then we put them in the middle, in that middle of the web. And then we start expanding out the different qualities, attributes that this individual brings to bear, which you admire. Those qualities and who they are, what they have achieved. Maybe that's what you admire the most. How they achieve, how they work a room, right? So we expand on that. So we have that person in the middle. And for me, it's a certain leader that I admired. And I actually emulated a lot of my current leadership style from this one leader. And I would say I'd put her right in the middle of that sheet of paper. And the first extension I would do is how she presents in a room. Her calm demeanor, her slowness of words to get her point across. As you can pick up here, that's how I speak. And it's because I wanted to emulate that same approach. I felt that she was very compelling. I felt that people really wanted to listen and lean in. And she always had something great to say. It was always enriched with insight. And I began to see her and wanting to mirror this individual's way of being because I saw how others were gravitating towards her. And I saw these qualities that I was not out of reach. I could definitely be very similar and put the little spice of Monica, that Latina passion, into how I move about in the world, how I communicate, how I lead my teams as a leader. So that person, the way that she spoke, the communication approach, the words that she used, how she slowed her tone and her words while talking was very soothing. Another part of it is that she never got flustered. Not on the outside, at least. If she was flustered, she did it really well on the inside. But for me as a Latina, I struggled with maintaining that composure and reeling in that passion because it would turn individuals off if I had too much passion or showed too much passion. I still can have a lot of passion, but when I came out very raw, very just forward, sometimes folks would be surprised and they weren't ready for it. And I saw that she had lots of passion, but she was composed. And she was very meticulous in her approach, very strategic in how she placed her words and her sentences as she guided people during challenges. So she's one of the persons I admire the most and who I created in this web of qualities that I would love to have for myself. I would love to learn these qualities. I would love to copy and mirror these qualities because it's going to bring great benefit to my career advancement. My overall goal was about career advancement, still is. Continuing to climb the ladder, Monica's ladder, not society's ladder, Monica's ladder of success. What other qualities do you see in that person in the middle of that web as we're pulling out these attributes and strengths and the way that they are that we admire so much? So I hope you take a moment, put a pause here if you need to, and take a moment to do those two activities. The first one about introspect, right? Getting to know yourself. What are your attributes? What are your strengths? What do you bring forward? What are things that you love to do? What are you good at? What are you the good person for, right? And when they're like, oh yeah, Monica's great at that. Let's call her. What would people say about you there? And the second phase is about who you admire the most, because we're going to take these two, your attributes, your strengths, and we're going to take the person we admire the most, their attributes and strengths, and we're going to see where we can meld some of these to create a brand that you can stand proudly with, that you can begin to work to build, whether that's at home, as a mother, right? As a household engineer, as a stay-at-home mom, which is absolutely amazing. I admire all you out there. As maybe a career person, maybe as, a single dad, or maybe someone who has the entire family under a roof and you're leading the charge of your parents, your wife, your children. It could be any role that you're taking. How do you want to show up in the world? And let's attach that to a success, a goal that you want to achieve. So building this brand will give you a sense of empowerment, as I sit up straight, because that word is so charged. It will give you a sense of empowerment. It'll give you a moment of celebration of who you are. It will allow you to be in a mindset of focus. Because when we're going all over the place, we've got 500 different ideas in our mind. We've got so much that we're chewing on. We feel guilt, we feel upset, we feel frustration because our life isn't where we want it to be, or because we failed, whatever failure means, or we haven't achieved that goal, or haven't been as successful as the neighbor, as the friend, as the sister, as the brother. This centers us. This grounds our ability to really get to know ourselves and building your personal and professional brand. So let's peel that back a bit. The two activities is about you and personal and professional. But you can also have a separation of the two, but not in the sense of like two different buckets. Let's not talk about it like that in separation piece, but they can mellow and meld in a way. But the way I present as a professional, and I'm actually really presenting a lot like a professional here on these videos and on this podcast, where you'll start, and I know we'll start to see a little bit more of the personal side of Monica, with that spice and that energy that I bring, and sometimes the sarcasm and the boldness. You all haven't, I don't think, seen that yet. If you know me, you know what I'm talking about. Obviously, you're like head nodding, I'm sure. But hopefully she will come through and meld into these videos and podcasts. The way, when I'm at work, the way I show up in front of executive leaders, the way when I'm presenting in front of an executive leadership team, when I'm talking to someone who is an owner of an organization or, senior leader, I'm going to speak very differently. I'm going to be a little bit more poised. I'm going to be a little bit more proper, a little bit more formal, a little infused with still Monica. There will still be some of that marrying of Monica in the way I talk, in the way I move, in the way I act. My passion will be there for sure. It will just be coming through a little bit differently. Whereas when I'm with friends and my sisters, and my husband said this to me the other day, when you are with your sisters, you're so loose and just like silly and funny, and which, I still have a level of silliness, and, I'm funny and just a spitball sometimes with my husband. I'm so much more different with my sisters because I'm digging deep into my childhood energy. That's how we grew up. We grew up in that environment together. That's how we bonded. So the way I approach my sisters, the way when we come together and we talk and we giggle and we laugh, we make jokes, it's going to be very different in the way I show up with my husband, which is still a silly side, but it's going to have like a fuse of passion, affection, and sexuality with him, which is going to be different. I'm not going to have that with my sisters, right? And same with my parents. I come off a little bit differently, a little bit more proper, a little bit more responsible, so we're all going to have just like these small different personas, but essentially at the core is that brand. At the core, it's like what people think when they think your name, right? Someone said, "Oh, your reputation precedes you," and this was at work for many years. Many people would say that to me. I'm like, "What does that mean? What does that mean?" And I was very self-conscious about it. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, am I coming through, a little too bitchy? Am I coming through a little too demanding, commanding?" I am a commander in my top strength. So is that coming off maybe? Is that turning people off? And so I would get a bit paranoid sometimes. I would be in my head, in my own mind, trying to walk through why people would say that. And then when someone said it, again, I asked what they meant because I didn't get a chance to do that the other times. And they're like, "Oh, we know you got this, Monica. You take charge. We know that when we put you on an assignment or a project, you're going to take that full circle and you're going to bring the goods and you're going to bring, the expectation and tradecraft level of quality." I was like, "Oh my gosh, that feels great." So that's the brand that I'm showing up as in my professional career. I'm leaving a footprint in my professional career and the way I show up. And that in and of itself will become my reputation. In and of itself, the way that I show up with the work that I do and how I act with others, how I interact with others and connect with my team and my colleagues, how I handle challenges and difficult situations will be what shows up as my brand. And I will do check-ins throughout and say, "Okay, is that how I want to show up? Is that how I want people to see Monica as?" Because I want them to forget my skin color to an extent. I don't want that to be a reason, right? I am very proud with who I am. I'm proud that I'm a minority, that I am a woman, but I don't want that to be the driver. I want my brand, the uniqueness of Monica, to be the driver, the package of me. So digging deep and identifying who you are as a first gen, the attributes that you bring, the perspectives and diversity that you bring into a professional environment, in your personal environment, how those two can meld, because those two are melding here with us as an example. Video, podcast, something fun, something also educational, hopefully, something also inspiring, hopefully, and sharing my story and representing Latinas, representing Bolivianas, representing, Hispanics overall, and women and people of color. Showing up here, having this fun, but also still having a little bit of that infused professionalism, because my vocabulary here is still leaning towards more of that formal professional vocabulary. I'm not F-bombing all the time, which I'd love to do a little more often. Which, that's my default. So anyways, still bringing the authentic self forward in sometimes bite-sized pieces if needed, here and there as you move along in your career, as you move along in your professional and personal life. The way you show up when you're dating as well is a brand that you need to show up as. But you can have all this brand for external view, right? That is you. And you work on that for years. And you build upon it and you learn lessons from it and you get feedback from people. But really what counts the most is going to be how you identify with you. Because once you're centered and grounded with you, the other stuff external will come. It was never my intention to come off like passionate like that, where people were like, your reputation precedes you. It was never an intention. It was just who I became. I identified, I reconnected with me. I was building my own inner brand, how I wanted to show up. I took all these bits and pieces, attributes, positive, amazing attributes that I admired from people, language that people used, I wanted to use. I remember I would write down in my notebook during meetings 20 years ago when I started in the business sales. I would write down different vocabulary words that people would, oh, what does that mean? Ooh, he used that in that sentence. And I'm in meetings writing sometimes 2 or 3 sentences down of what people would say who were, vice presidents and senior vice presidents and executives, because I said, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that sentence one day. I'm going to use that word. That's an awesome word. I loved how he constructed that sentence because I want to sound like that because my vocabulary wasn't super extensive. It was great, but I was, in my early 20s. So it wasn't yet developed in the professional world. So I began to build that for myself. But the way you show up and that passion that you have, especially as minorities, as people of first gen, because you could have first gens that are not minorities, but people of first gen as well, in general, you come and bring a different perspective, a different passion, a different level of passion and motivation that will play beautifully into your success and leverage that as part of your brand. And it will come through. It will come through the years. So this isn't something, after this video podcast, you're like, oh, I know who I am. I know what my identity is. I know, how I'm going to show up in the world. I know what they're going to say about me. It is all a journey. It is all a journey. It is always going to be a journey. And the way that we develop, our brand changes slightly, tweaks here, tweaks there. They may not be an automatic on and off switch unless there's, trauma or other things that were impactful in your life that occurred. But there is always going to be this evolution of your personal brand, of your professional brand. And you're always needing to do the check-ins to say, am I coming off as authentic? Is this really me? Is there a fear here? Do I feel safe coming off as the person that I really am? So, story on Monica deep inside. There is a generational trauma, a karmatic generational issue in my family. I'm not going to say what side it is, but it's in one of the sides, obviously. It is and I'm trying to find the words, but maybe I don't have to be so sensitive about the words here. So I'll just come out and say it because I'm going to be bold here. It's rage. And I've seen it in many of my fellow Bolivians. I've seen it in many of my fellow Latinx people. And it could be, cultural, obviously. But this is definitely generational for me, particularly, specifically for me. There's a side of my family that has a tremendous amount of rage within. And it has taken many people a lifetime to work through it. And I strongly believe that I am working through it today. But what I'm talking about is like this internal rage fire that is a default in my personality. And it's not a flaw. I don't see it as a flaw. I used to be embarrassed of it. I used to see it as a flaw, which is why I'm able to talk about it today. Because it's not a flaw for me. It's my passion within. It makes me feel strongly about things and be in touch with myself. I've been able to evolve it and control it, right? Emotional regulation is incredibly important. And I'm going to take that back a step. I am able to identify it consciously when it's happening, and I'm able to work through it so I can control it. Do I always control it? No, because this is something I've got to continue to work on, probably for the rest of my life. And where it's become a lot more evident for me, because I know I have this. This is my inner default. And I've seen it in family members. I've seen it through extended family members where there was abuse and hurt and hot-headedness. And that's how we define it. Oh, that person's a hothead. That person is impulsive in their actions and their rage, and they go from 0 to 100 immediately. And a name that comes to mind right now is Fosforito. Ay, esa chica es una fosforito. Like, I would hear that often. Or no aguanta pulgas. Oh my gosh, I've heard that when people are defining me. I would hear that all the time. It means that you light up like a fire, which is fosforito. Or second, that you don't stand ticks on your body, or the ticks don't stand you, something like that. Or that you can't stand even a tick on your body, which no one does. But I'm just saying, right? Like, you just can't stand things. And that was really negative initially, because I was showing up with a lot of like rage, and I was very kind of authoritative in my approach with people. I would put the hammer down very quickly. I would cuss people out very quickly. I would go from 0 to 100. And yes, that's a lot of emotional irregulation, but it's also, driven by my rage. Like, that was my default. And it still sometimes is, where I have to be very conscious about it. I work through it every day, very much intentionally. I have come a long way, 12 years, very intentionally working at it every day. I've had some downfalls, especially during my hormonal times, during pregnancies. After I had my son, I had a really bad downfall in my rage with my husband, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I'm just not ready to talk about it right now, as I grab a hair here. So there's still times in my life where it like fluctuates, and it's very intense depending on my experience and depending on my hormones. But I do feel that it's definitely generational, as I see it with my youngest child, who is strong-willed, like one of the most strong-willed individuals I've ever met. Very strong-willed individual, which also has amazing attributes for a child growing up, because they're going to be resilient and persistent and, just wanting to achieve and, have all this power and drive within naturally, which is the beautiful side of what I have as well, because I'm very strong-willed as well. So my default, that generational issue that I have, the genetic issue that I have, which, by the way, I read through studies that you can weave that out generation through generation. If every generation does the work, you can weave it out eventually from the family. That to me is hopeful. It's beautiful. It means that I have to help my youngest, through that, and help her develop and grow. And so when she's ready one day to have children and doesn't pass that on as intensely, right, with the level of intensity that it was passed on to me, and we're breaking that cycle somewhere, we're breaking it down until eventually the generations ahead, maybe a few, 2 or 3 ahead, no longer have to battle with that. Hopefully sooner than that. But anyways, I thought I'd slip that in, because that's amazing. If I could find the study, I'll probably bring it up in one of my next podcasts. I'll bring it to light here and give you more specifics on that if you're interested. But going back to identity and going back to branding, that was something that I needed to tame. When I was very immersed in the Bolivian community, dancing, I've danced since I was 14 years old in caporales, which is the Bolivian folklore dance. I love it. It's like my passion. And through those years, I built up this really negative reputation, as a fighter, as a instigator, as, a hothead, as whatever, people sometimes would fear me and my attitude and my rage and my hot-headedness, and to a point where, there were really negative incidents that happened in my early 20s. I also didn't have very good relationships. They were very violent relationships, physically harmful relationships. I was hurt very often by boyfriends physically. And obviously I would dish it back. And so that's something I'm not proud of, but they were very toxic, unhealthy relationships in the early years. And once I started to work on myself, I knew, like, I reflected and I said, oh my gosh, like, this is huge. Like, this is an issue because now it's coming through at work sometimes. Like, I'm not like lashing out like that because I'd probably be fired. But when I was in my first 5 years in my career, in my sales career, I had a moment of reflection when I was clashing with someone, and I really wanted to come forward with that rage, I remember. And I stopped myself from doing it, and I said, oh my gosh, like, there's, like, I can control this. It'll take me some time to control it. I've got to go take a walk. I've got to take a few deep breaths. I've got to drink water. I have to go dance it out, get it out of my system. And I cannot show up that way, the way I was showing up in my early 20s in the community, with my friends, with my reputation. I was like, I cannot show up that way because it's not going to take me anywhere. I knew that. I knew I was going to lose opportunities. I was going to lose respect. I was going to lose opportunities. I was going to turn people off. People weren't going to trust and respect me. And that would hurt my reputation in my professional career. I made a conscious decision right then and there, before I blew up with this one individual who's incredibly rude and mean and a bully to me. And I said, no, I'm going to take the high ground. I'm going to take a rise above, and I'm going to work on this. And I began to explore and educate myself on strategies like the box breathing exercises, the 4-4-4 or the 4-7-8 breathing strategy, which I've done for years. Going to take out walks. I began to obsess over dancing again. I was actually doing some dance fitness. I would even do 2 hours of cardio dance workout to get the rage out and to regulate myself again. I mean, I was in the best shape of my life. that's for damn sure. But it was because I was working through how to control the passion and the just fire that I brought with me. And I needed to learn how to better channel that fire and passion, reduce the rage, and have it come through in a different way to help drive me, to help drive others and inspire others. And I don't know if you all have similar experiences where it's hard to regulate your emotions during times, especially at work or with family and out in the world. But it's possible. You just really have to work at it. But a part of my brand there was I did not want to be seen as the hot-headed chula. That was my nickname, by the way. I didn't want to be seen as the hot-headed chula, the fosforito, the no aguanta pulgas type woman. I wanted to be seen in a better, respectful light. I wanted to be seen as more of a calming force. That was really my motivation, calming force. I still had the fire and passion, but I came from a different place. I came from a place of peace and love and compassion and understanding. And I developed those feelings and understanding and seeing people as more like humans and creating a narrative in my mind that, oh, they must be going through so much. Finding that empathy and compassion for people helped settle my rage and help my brand thrive to be that calming force during challenging situations. When I encountered difficult personalities in people, I would still be stern, but I would be calm and I would be serious. And sometimes I still had a smile on my face. Just because I didn't want to put my pouty face on or my, bitch face on. So, know that branding is an evolution. It's a development. It is a lifelong journey. But if you haven't started yet, or you're at a point where you don't like the type of reputation that you've built so far, if you don't like what people are saying about you, right? But they don't define you. You define yourself. Let's be clear about that, because I'm very, very cautious about putting too much weight on what society says about you. But I think it's a good meter. It's a good marker. It's a good temperature read to help you be better and identify you. And yes, there's still going to be people out there to say whatever they want to say. Always going to have critics out in the world, and it won't matter. Side note, a girlfriend of mine, we met yesterday, and she's like, oh my God, you're so courageous and brave to come out like that. And I said, I've gotten to a point where I am so comfortable in my own skin. I am so incredibly proud of me. I am so incredibly passionate about what I do that those naysayers are always going to exist. That they're always going to build narratives around who I am. And there's nothing I can do to control that. But if there's a majority of people, right, if we look at the 70-30 rule, the 80-20 rule, where there's more of a majority that are, saying, get it going, Monica, or good for you, and they're celebrating with you, and they're giving you some great feedback, especially people that you trust, that have the best intention for you. Those are some great temperature markers for you in your identity. And those other naysayers can continue to naysay. There's always going to be haters. There's always going to be people that don't like what you do, don't like how you show up. Please remember, there's still a lot of work that they potentially need to go through themselves, that they have not yet been in touch with themselves. Maybe they have not yet understood what love, compassion, and empathy for others means. Maybe they were growing and being a part of more of a different culture or a different upbringing that perpetuated that type of way of thinking. And so they're just a product of their environment. But always know that there's hope for everyone to reach a level of kindness and love and of compassion and empathy. That's how we're going to drive better in this world. And if we all build a brand around the baseline as a foundation, love, compassion, empathy, understanding humanly for one another, then we're going to show up our best. Even in the challenging moments, we're going to show up better than what we showed up 10 years ago. It's a journey. It's a roller coaster. However you want to define it, with loops. Those roller coasters that go, 90, 100 miles an hour or something. I don't know how fast they go nowadays. With all these loops. And that's exactly how a journey is. A personal development journey. A rebranding yourself type journey, where you're trying to find who you are and how you want to show up in your professional world, how you want to show up in front of your children, how you want to be modeled as, right? And first gens, we struggle with that. And so take that moment to do those first two exercises that we talked about. The map of you, of things that you can celebrate for yourself, your strengths, your talents. And if you don't know those and you're struggling with what are your strengths, what are your talents, I've got a great assessment to help you. Just reach out to me. There's a Clifton Strengths assessment that is positive psychology at its best, and it will help you weave through what your top strengths are and what your top talents are, what are your biggest motivators. And it actually is very, very empowering to see that on paper. And I'm sure 1,000% that you're going to be head nodding and you're going to be so joyful to see that there's something that can really identify with you. So if you're unable to do that first phase and you're having a struggle, let's do a strengths assessment, right? It's actually, very, very affordable. The assessment itself is like $60, and then I can help coach you as well for a little bit of additional fee. But, we'll get through it, and it's going to help empower you to feel great and understand who you are. That's the first phase of that approach, is you. And the second is who you admire. And let's try to build an identity around both. Still staying true to yourself and your passions, but also moving in and developing and growing to show up your best self and reach your fullest potential. All right, love to hear from you if you have any feedback, anything to say about your experience with identity and rebranding. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer those for you. Reach out if you're interested in that strengths assessment. Love to walk you through that. That is one of the most powerful assessments I've ever taken. I've taken many. So I highly recommend it. But wherever you are, I hope you have a blessed day. I hope you have an amazing day. I'm sending you all positive vibes and a big virtual hug. And I'll see you next time. Bye.